Power. Wisdom. Courage. 3 words that describe the goddesses that created Hyrule and the most powerful force that can be found within its borders. He who would win the Golden Triangles in its fullness must have all 3 forces in balance. Without that balance, the Triforce splits, leaving but one piece in the hands of the one who obtained it, while the other 2 are scattered and hidden away. Why? What is it that the Triforce sees in these so-called unbalanced individuals? Is it some divine mandate issued by the goddesses that formed it? Are the other pieces jealous, desirous for more say in how the Triforce is used? Or is it perhaps something more? A warning to those who would seek the power of gold. That behind those noble virtues is the potential for destruction, sorrow, and despair. To everything there is a time, and to everything there is a season. The age is appointed for peace and chaos to come forth. And those times and seasons are watched over by those who know their power. The power to endure great trials, the wisdom to see past a sorrowful moment, and the courage to move beyond despair. With more than 10 years gone since the original Zelda's release, discussions began between Nintendo and Capcom to remake the first Legend of Zelda game for the Game Boy Color, which would serve as a springboard for the pairing to produce additional Zelda titles for the handheld console. The difficulty in adapting the old game to the new system, however, proved frustrating, and the development team expressed the desire to skip the remake and move on to an original game right away. The eventual conclusion was not 1, but 3 new games that were to be called the Triforce series, titled the Mystical Seed of Power, Mystical Seed of Wisdom, and Mystical Seed of Courage. These 3 games, released simultaneously, would interact with each other via a password system, and allow them to be played in any order. But, once again, technical difficulties plagued the team as the passwords grew too complex to handle. To simplify the system, Mystical Seed of Courage was cancelled, and in 2001, Mystical Seed of Power and Wisdom were released as the Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages. Now, the concept of simultaneously released games was not new. The Pokemon series had just completed its 2nd generation and had made a huge impact with its game-to-game interactions. Each version in a generation, however, has essentially the same layout and plot, with only a few alterations to keep things interesting. As you start either Oracle's game, they appear to use the same concept, as the opening sequences are also obviously very similar to each other, with Link riding towards Hyrule Castle, and the Triforce sending him to an unknown place. The overall objective of each game is also essentially the same. Collect 8 essences in order to open the path to an Oracle's rescue. Combine that with a style that's not just identical to each other, but also very similar to Link's Awakening, and you might be tempted to not just skip one of the pair, but to skip both entirely. Once you actually start either game, you'll be glad you didn't. At the beginning of Seasons, the forced transportation to Holodrum leaves you unconscious until you are discovered by a young woman. When you awaken, you find a merry band of traveling performers on their way to Hyrule, and the woman who found you, their star dancer, named Din. The name relation to the Goddess of Power is a dead giveaway, as is Impa's inclusion in the band, and it turns out it wasn't fooling anyone else either. A tornado soon tears into the camp, scatters its members, and takes Din, Oracle of Seasons, to the lair of Onyx, General of Destruction. In a massive display of might, Onyx buries the Temple of Seasons and consequently sends the weather of Holodrum into complete chaos. Sent once again on a quest in a new world, you begin to orient yourself to your new environment. But despite exploring a new country, there seems to be just enough that is familiar to keep yourself on course. The Sleepy Maku tree, who directs you to the different dungeons, bears a strong resemblance to the Deku tree. The monsters seem mostly recycled from Link's Awakening, and right alongside the new characters are various inhabitants that seem like they just recently moved in from Ocarina of Time. But right about there is where the similarities stop. For not only do you have an entirely new map to explore, the changing seasons ensure that you're never going to have the same experience as you travel. While the purpose of the mixing seasons is essentially to provide barriers similar to Link's Awakening, the plot and the unique nature of the barriers make them a natural part of the environment, and, consequently, not as annoying. As you continue to explore, the barriers become second nature, as are the hidden portals to the land beneath Holodrum. Subrosia and its inhabitants are certainly unique. Their matching cloaks, foreign ideas, and lava-filled home either make them endearing or just plain annoying depending on your tastes. They're as useful and talkative as the people on the surface, however, and can provide useful items if you're willing to adapt a little to their culture. As proves true in every Zelda game, understanding how these people live is essential if you want to have full access to the newly rediscovered Temple of Seasons, and use the full power of the spirits and rod inside. The Rod of Seasons is arguably the most unique game mechanic the Zelda franchise has ever produced. Other games, and this series in particular, have manipulated height, transportation, and especially time over and over again. Although there have been some instances where the weather is altered, changing the overall climate of an area is easily this game's most distinctive feature. Not only are you able to overcome the barriers across Holodrum, but the changing environment gives 4 perspectives to every part of the country, practically giving you 4 worlds in one. The dungeons also provide a unique flair to your adventure. Expanding on both A Link to the Past and Link's Awakening, the level designers took full advantage of the 2D perspective, creating dungeons that are much more intricate than you would expect from a Game Boy game. And alongside many of the usual items are some you won't find anywhere else, creating opportunities for some fascinating puzzles. The bosses, meanwhile, reflect the familiar foes from the original Zelda, but with just enough alterations to provide a completely different challenge. Those challenges come to a climax as you near the end of your journey, traversing the original ruins of the Temple of Seasons and diving into a very angry volcano in Subrosia after the final essence. The last dungeon is massive, requiring all of your skill and patience as you handle both extremes of fire and ice. As you head into Onyx's tower, nearly all finesse is thrown out the window in favor of a stand-up gauntlet of enemies, with Din and Onyx waiting at the end. The General's power is unquestionable, wielding a massive ball and chain and using Din as a human shield, not to mention his armor requiring the spin attack to inflict any kind of damage. Then, true to final boss form, Onyx refuses to stay down, unleashing his full power in the form of a black dragon that is quite intimidating, especially for a Game Boy Color game. It's only after slaying this behemoth that Din is rescued and Holodrum is returned to normal. But events during, and especially after your journey, point to a much bigger plan being put into motion. The trip to Labrina is much less exhausting, as you arrive, fully conscious, just in time to save Impa from a group of Octoroks. Impa's blue tinge is a little concerning, as is her reluctance to approach a sacred barrier, but you pay little heed to it, as the sounds of a beautiful song catches your ear. Just down the way is the singer Nehru, with an enchanting melody, an attentive audience, and a devoted bodyguard. Nehru is also set to travel to Hyrule, under the threat of a foretold darkness. That darkness then immediately reveals itself, as Impa's unusual behavior is unmasked as the victim of possession by a dark sorceress named Varen. Leaving Impa's body, Varen quickly makes for Nehru, and with the Oracle of Ages under her control, she opens a portal in time and makes for the past. At first glance, having yet another time travel mechanic seems a bit boring. I mean, this is the third time in 4 games where time is the main feature. But instead of days or even years, Oracle of Ages is true to its name and takes you back centuries, 400 years to be precise, to when Labrina was ruled by a queen, the local Gorons were just setting up their city and culture, and the Maku tree was just a lovesick sapling. That amount of time is enough to change much of Labrina's layout, giving the same kind of alternate world feeling that you got in A Link to the Past. While the general geography remains mostly the same, many of the cliffs, trees, and other various details shift between time periods, and by using Nehru's Harp of Ages, you're able to jump between them with increasing efficiency in order to access different areas and traverse through what would otherwise be an impossible journey. Adding another layer of complexity are the changes you can make, altering the past to affect the future. From simple movement of seeds to grow plants in a particular spot, or, like in Mermaid's Cave, opening paths to an entirely new area. Additionally, items from the future can be brought back and used in the past. Despite being a relatively straightforward concept, it can actually prove quite difficult to wrap your mind around. One way has you looking at things in a cause-to-effect fashion in a linear timeline, while the other forces you to look at the 2 ages as if they are separate locations, resulting in a number of paradoxes that will leave you confused if you think about them too much. It's actually impressive how intricate this game is. The 2 sides of Labrina hold not just imposing dungeons, but a surprising breadth of side events, nearly all of which have to be accomplished before getting anywhere. While Seasons deals mostly with the environment and periodic trips to Subrosia, Ages holds an extensive cast of races and characters. Every new location finds a different group of people, from the familiar faces of Termina to the brand new Tokay. Each group holding ties to both time periods that you have to navigate. Handling the twists and turns of time travel almost makes the dungeons a welcome break. Just like Seasons, the sheer size of each labyrinth is surprising, as are their complexity. And while it would have been easy to simply reuse or expand the same puzzles in both games, the items are instead tweaked or replaced altogether, creating an entirely new experience and a completely different onslaught. Holodrum's dungeons deal mostly in physical traps and platforming, basically just trying to find ways to kill you. Labrina's labyrinths are challenges of the mind, perplexing you with a variety of puzzles, some of which take up the entire dungeon. All the while, Varen's plot is ongoing, using manipulation and Nehru's powers to commandeer Queen Ambi's tower project. The sorceress seems to have everything planned, using the queen, her subjects, and even you, to gather everything she needs to create her age of darkness. And when you finally have the chance to separate Varen from Nehru, Varen immediately seizes her next opportunity and possesses Queen Ambi. When at last the tower is complete, it is fortified with a wall of illusions that only the Mako seed can break. Then, when facing Varen again, you not only have to separate her from the queen, but peel back the many forms the sorceress has created for herself. Still, even if Ages has a technically bigger plot, the overall length of both games are about the same. You share familiar items from Link's Awakening, such as the Rock's Feather and the Power Bracelet, while other items, though unique to their games, still share common purposes. Both lands allow you to grow gacha trees in various spots, giving you surprise gifts if you remember to stop by, and the mystical seeds in particular connect Holodrum and Labrina, and are used countless times in both games, whether by hand or as projectiles. Many of the people you interact with hang around as well. Vasu the jeweler has set up a little franchise, appraising magical rings that can ease your journey. The witch Syrup and her apprentice Maple, yes, we see what they did there, appear to have homes in both lands, ready to offer their special potion, or just have a flyby, run-in. Most memorable are the animal trio of Moosh, Ricky, and Dimitri, all three of which show up in both games to help with environmental puzzles and travel, and one of them becomes a fast friend, lending you a flute to call them at any time. But just having similar styles and items isn't unusual. It's the way these games that are actually connected that makes them unique. At the end of either game, you're given a password that acts as a gateway to the other game. By inputting that password, the second game becomes less of an independent title and more of a continuation of a running story. Certain characters know of your previous exploits, and Impa, at least, is a bit frustrated she forgot to ask you for help sooner. Other minor differences change events that don't have any effect on the gameplay, but still create a sense that the lands truly relate to each other. Each game, when connected, has a certain character who leaves the first land for the second, in order to take some personal time. Other figures appear only when you are continuing your adventure, providing additional passwords that unlock secondary events in the land you left behind. The rewards from these events can then be brought over to the second game and used to aid you in your current quest. And that quest, when connected between the two games, reveal a conspiracy to revive an old foe. About halfway through your first game, an encounter alerts you to a potential threat beyond your current objective. Near the end, an open declaration is made as Twinrova makes an entrance and reveals herself. Wait, is it herself? Or themselves? The pronoun game makes absolutely no sense with these two. Anyway, themselves as the ones orchestrating events, creating the situation needed to light an evil flame. The plot then continues into the next game, as Twinrova's plans move on to not one, but two additional flames, combining the main plot of the game with the appearance of Princess Zelda. As the events of the second game draws to a supposed happy ending, Zelda is kidnapped as the intended sacrifice for both the final flame's ignition and the revival of Ganon. The oracles transport you to Twinrova's stronghold, which is defended only by a Lost Woods-style maze. Zelda lays on the altar before you, but of course, it's not going to be that easy. Twinrova faces you as the separate witches and as a combined form that spreads each element through the entire room. Defeating the witches should stop the rites from being completed, but no surprise, a workaround allows Twinrova to become the sacrifice instead, summoning a monstrous and destructive Ganon. With no break and no chance to recover, there's nothing to do but charge in and fight with all you have. When the battle finally ends, you return to Zelda, and the two of you are brought back into the sunlight, where Impa, the Maku Tree, and both oracles anxiously await your return. Put together, the Oracle games create a nice harmony of story that culminates, if briefly, in a dramatic ending. But despite the single story, it does seem a little strange to bring ages and seasons together. The connection between the changing seasons and the passing ages can be a bit hard to see. Weather and the seasons are ever-changing, if not at the speed the Rod of Seasons can create, and moves in a cyclical pattern. The march of time, meanwhile, is unyielding and never-ending, and nothing we can do can alter its flow or turn back the clock. But in both Labrynna and Holodrum, the essences of each land came together to independently create the same item, the seed of the Maku Tree. Looking at the essences one at a time, they seem almost haphazardly put together as a sort of gimmick to mirror Link's awakening. But perhaps it's those essences that are the key. Taken as a story, the essences of nature tell us of the circle of life, the various forces of the world that, when brought together, allow for seeds to sprout and grow strong, and thereafter create the new seeds that will continue the cycle into the next generation. That cycle is the same symbolic process by which all of our lives are allowed to grow. The essences of ages are a product of all of those life cycles put together over countless repetitions in a way that endures untold hardships. While the short-term world we live in is fraught with change and challenges, what comes from those many temporary trials is a bedrock of strength in life that can weather any storm and temper any flame. Fitting, then, that Twinrova's dark rites involved lighting flames, a force that is a natural threat to the plants and seeds you use on your quest. And even more appropriate are the number of flames and their names: destruction, sorrow, and despair. Onyx, General of Darkness, was a being of great strength, with powerful armor and a dragon form that is not easily overcome, and it was his unchecked power that caused such great destruction in Holodrum. Varen, Sorceress of Shadows, had the means and wit to devise a chilling plan. Her knowledge of the human spirit showed her how humans connect, and her sinister misuse of wisdom allowed her to manipulate those spirits and generate sorrow. And Twinrova, the Gerudo Witches, kidnapped the symbol of hope for the people, thereby robbing them of their courage, and thus creating despair. The mirroring of the flames to the Triforce is a poetic reflection to how these forces, and any virtue, work in real life. Each of them are admirable, even desirable attributes to one's character. But when taken to excess or used for selfish ends, those virtues become vices and can end up destroying yourself and those around you, often robbing them of connecting traits. Ganon himself has always been a perfect example of this. Like our hero, he is always strong, devious, and unyielding. But his obsession with power and personal gain distorts those traits into forces that destroy, depress, and demoralize. While Link, through his various journeys, takes his natural courage and in turn develops the power and wisdom in the perfect balance necessary to become the hero. Perfect enough sometimes to wield the ultimate power in Hyrule, and in this case, be trusted by it in order to bring peace to the world. The seasons set in their place, and time's flow restored, with Holodrum, Labrynna, and Hyrule again at peace, Link bids farewell to his newfound friends and sails over the horizon. There will be new dances to be done, and new songs to be sung, but the memories we made will always be with us, and through sun and rain, through years untold, and to whatever end we may meet, we will be led by the power, wisdom, and courage we have obtained, watched over by the Oracle of Seasons and the Oracle of Ages. Thanks everyone for coming on this long journey in Ages and Seasons. With 2 games to talk about, it's obvious that we aren't going to be able to hit everything, so please comment some of your favorite parts from these games. As part of the Game Boy era, these 2 games can get a bit lost to history, so make sure you don't let it, and share this video with those you know. If you'd like to see me and Sweetie Senpai take on the task of rescuing the Oracles, you can find the playlist in the description below. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more, the playlist for the other tributes are down there as well. We're almost halfway through the Zelda collection now. I hope you'll come along for the rest of the adventure. Please subscribe so you can know when the journey continues. Link has sailed on, and so must we. Join me next time as we hit the high seas and learn of the power of winds in The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. See you next time.